I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here we are. My name's Mark, and I've been married to Lisa for almost 10 years now. We had a pretty good life, 2 kids, a nice house in the suburbs, decent jobs. Nothing too fancy, but we got by, or at least I thought we did. Things started feeling a little off a few months ago, little things that I brushed aside at first. Her phone ringing when I was around, her being unusually short with me, and her being more secretive about her phone and schedule. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something definitely wasn't right. I'd catch her lying about where she was going or what she was doing, and yet she'd always have some excuse ready. She'd say I was paranoid, accuse me of not trusting her. Then came the fight about her constantly working late, which I now realize was just another excuse. She was always busy with work, but her evenings and nights seemed to be filled with something else. Still, I've tried to keep my head down, telling myself I might be overthinking it. That was until I decided to do a little digging myself. I've never been the jealous type before, but after everything, I felt like I needed proof. Just a bit of reassurance that I wasn't crazy, or maybe just some peace of mind. One night, while she was out with her friends, supposedly, I snuck into her office to see if I could find anything unusual. I knew it was wrong, but my gut told me I needed to see for myself. That's when I spotted her phone on the desk, unlocked, and I couldn't resist. I scrolled through her messages, her emails, trying to find a smoking gun, and I did. Not in her messages, but on her computer in the folder labeled Photos. I noticed a folder called Events, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped. There were pictures of Lisa with someone else, someone I didn't recognize at first, but then I saw his face. It was Frank, the funeral director from the local funeral home. That's when everything clicked. I'd seen her acting weird around him lately, but I never thought it would come to this. I mean, who cheats on their husband with a funeral director? That's just disgusting, right? But there they were, close enough to kiss, probably more than that. I felt rage, betrayal, hurt all at once. How could she do this to me, to us? While we were supposed to be grieving my mother's passing, she was cheating behind my back. I kept scrolling, hoping I'd see more evidence, and I did. There were even explicit pictures. She wasn't just flirting, she was fucking him. I couldn't believe it. My whole world just shattered in that moment. I felt numb, like I'd been punched in the gut. My first instinct was to confront her immediately, but I knew I had to plan this out. I took screenshots of everything, saved the files, and then quietly slipped out of her office before she could come back. I spent the next few hours just sitting in the dark, trying to process what I'd seen. The betrayal cut so deep. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the fact that she lied about everything, even about her grief. I'd been there for her, supporting her through my mother's funeral, and meanwhile she was screwing around with the guy who was supposed to be helping us say goodbye to her. That's just brutal. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs. Was I blind? Was I just stupid for trusting her? And what now? The thought of confronting her was terrifying, but I knew I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. I had to face her, had to hear her lie her way out of this. But I already knew deep down that her explanations wouldn't be enough. They never are. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding head and a stomach that felt like it was in knots. I couldn't sleep, not after what I saw. I kept replaying everything in my mind, her face, the photos, the way she'd lied to me for months. I kept thinking about how I'd always tried to be the good husband, the patient one, the guy who didn't question her motives or her actions. I thought about the times she snapped at me when I brought up her late nights or her phone, how she'd roll her eyes and say I was paranoid or insecure. Now I knew better. She was just waiting for the right moment to screw me over. I decided I couldn't keep this bottled up. I needed to confront her, not just for myself but for my kids who deserved to know the truth eventually. But I also knew I had to be strategic. If I went in guns blazing, she'd deny everything or turn it around on me. So I waited until she was home, pretending everything was normal, trying to keep my cool. When she walked in, her face lit up like she was happy to see me, but I saw the flicker of guilt behind her eyes. I didn't waste time. I threw the photos on the table and stared at her. "The hell is Frank?" I asked, voice shaking. Her face immediately went pale and she looked like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. She tried to brush it off, smirking in that bitchy way she always did when she thought she could talk her way out of something. "Oh, come on, Mark. It's not what you think. It's just a stupid mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far." She crossed her arms, acting like I was overreacting. That made me even angrier. I wasn't about to let her spin this. "Don't lie to me," I said, voice low and furious. "I saw the photos. You're screwing around with the funeral director. While we're trying to grieve my mother, you're in bed with him. How long has this been going on?" Her eyes flickered with anger, then she scoffed. "Are you serious? You think I'd cheat on you of all people? You're just paranoid. Maybe you're the one looking for someone else." She spat the words out like they were venom. I wanted to punch her in the face. How could she sit there and lie so blatantly? I knew her too well, her lies, her bullshit, her ability to twist everything to her advantage. But I wasn't going to fall for it this time. I told her I knew about the affair, and her smile faded a little, replaced by that bitchy, dismissive look she always had when she knew she was winning. She insisted it was all a mistake, that Frank was just helping her with arrangements, that she never meant for anything to happen, that she's not that kind of person. Yeah, right. I could see through her lies like glass. I wanted to scream, but I kept my voice steady, telling her I'd been going through her stuff, that I'd seen everything. She didn't deny it anymore. Instead, she got defensive, throwing tantrums, claiming I was crazy, insecure, jealous. That's when it hit me that she was good at twisting things, twisting me. She was the master manipulator. I felt the betrayal burn deep in my chest, like I'd been punched from the inside. It was hard to breathe, hard to think straight. I'd never felt so utterly crushed, so disillusioned. My wife, the woman I trusted, the woman I loved, was lying in bed with a guy I'd never even suspected. She was screwing around with someone who handled death for a living, and I was just supposed to accept her word that it was all just a coincidence. I told her I wanted her to leave right then. I couldn't stand to look at her. She threw a fit, crying, calling me crazy, saying I was ruining everything because I didn't trust her. That made me feel even worse, like I was the bad guy for finding out the truth. But I knew I was done. I couldn't stay married to someone who lied, cheated, and thought she could just brush it off. That's when I started planning what to do next. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. All I knew was that nothing would be the same anymore. I felt numb, but also a strange sense of clarity. I deserved better than to be with someone who could betray me like this. That's the moment I realized I was going to take control of this mess, no matter how much it hurt. Over the next few days, I stayed quiet, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I kept replaying everything in my head, and each time I did, the anger and hurt grew stronger. I couldn't believe how she had lied to me for so long, how she thought she could just keep sneaking around and I'd never find out. The betrayal hit harder than anything I'd ever experienced, especially knowing she'd been doing it behind my back even during the funeral arrangements. It felt like my world had crumbled, and I was just standing in the wreckage, trying to piece myself back together. I started thinking about what I was going to do next. I knew I needed a plan, something that would hit her where it hurts, but also something that would give me some kind of justice. I wasn't interested in petty revenge. I just wanted her to understand that she couldn't lie and cheat without consequences. I also had to consider the kids. I didn't want to drag them through a messy divorce if I could avoid it, but I also couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to be honest with myself. I was done. One morning, I saw her come out of the house with her purse, looking nervous. It was like she knew I was onto her or that I'd done something. Maybe she was worried I'd confront her again or that I'd tell everyone. Either way, I decided I'd had enough of her lies. I called a lawyer, explained everything calmly, and started to ask about my options. I didn't want to rush into anything, but I knew I had to be prepared. If I was going to get divorced, I needed to get everything on record, her lies, her affair, everything. I didn't want her to twist it around later. What really pushed me to act was what I found out about her plans. She'd been talking on the phone with Frank, planning to meet him again right after I'd confronted her. That was the last straw. She was still lying, still sneaking around, even after I'd caught her. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. I decided that I'd set a trap, one that would expose her for good. I started recording her conversations secretly, just to be sure. I didn't want to do anything impulsive. I needed proof that she was still actively cheating. It was surreal, knowing she was still lying, still sneaking around. I felt like I was living in some bad dream. Every time I saw her, I could see the guilt behind her eyes, but she refused to admit anything. She kept trying to gaslight me, making me doubt my own instincts, telling me I was crazy for suspecting her. But I knew better. I'd seen enough. I'd gathered enough evidence to make her realize she couldn't keep lying forever. One day, I decided I'd had enough playing nice. I sat her down and told her I knew everything about the affair, the lies, the sneaking around. I told her I was done with her manipulations and that I was filing for divorce. Her response was to scream, cry, and accuse me of ruining her life, calling me a jealous, insecure bastard. Honestly, I didn't care. Her tears didn't move me anymore. Her lies only made me angrier. I told her she'd better pack her things because she was leaving. That's when she finally broke down, realizing I was serious. That was the moment I knew I had to act quickly. I started to prepare for the fallout, the kids, the house, the legal stuff. I wasn't interested in revenge just for revenge's sake, but I wanted her to see that I wasn't a fool. I wanted her to understand that her choices had consequences. I spent the next few days gathering everything, screenshots, recordings, bank statements, anything that could help me build a case. I wasn't planning to fight dirty, but I was determined not to let her manipulate the situation anymore. And all along, I felt this strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I finally knew the truth and could move on. Sadness because I'd lost the woman I thought I knew. But honestly, the betrayal had broken whatever trust. I had left. I knew I was starting a new chapter, one where I'd look out for myself and my kids first, and I'd be damned if I let her get away with ruining everything. The day I filed for divorce, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. It was like finally opening a door I'd been afraid to walk through, but once I did, there was no turning back. The lawyer told me I had enough evidence to proceed, and I could see the look of satisfaction on her face when I handed over the files, her face twisted with anger and guilt. I knew she'd tried to spin her web of lies, but I'd caught her dead to rights. Still, I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end of it. I knew she'd fight, do everything she could to stay in control, to twist things around, to make it seem like I was the villain. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Lisa started acting even more bitchy, snapping at the kids, throwing tantrums when I tried to talk to her about the divorce. She insisted she was not that kind of woman, that she'd never cheat, that I was just jealous and insecure. She spun stories, lied repeatedly, and tried to guilt me into dropping everything. Honestly, I was past caring what she said. I was just trying to keep my head above water, focus on the kids, and get through this mess. Meanwhile, I started to see the real extent of her manipulations. She'd been trying to turn the kids against me, telling them I was being unfair, that I was the bad guy. It hurt so much to see her lie to their faces, knowing she was doing it for her own selfish reasons. I didn't want to fight with her in front of the kids, so I kept my distance, but I was taking steps to make sure everything was documented. Her outbursts, her attempts at guilt tripping, everything I could use if this went to court. I also started making plans to move out, just in case things got worse. I didn't want to be under her thumb anymore. One night she came home late, again claiming she was out with friends, but I didn't buy it. I knew she was meeting Frank. I followed her secretly and saw her slip into a motel. It was all I needed. That confirmed everything. She was still cheating, still lying, still trying to hide it from me. That night I sat there in my car, just watching, feeling a mix of rage and sadness. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I had loved her, trusted her, and she threw it all away for a quick fuck with a funeral director who probably thought he was some kind of hero. That's when I decided I'd make her pay for her betrayal, but not in some childish, vengeful way. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. I started planning my next moves, getting a private investigator to dig into her whereabouts and her communication with Frank. I also made sure to keep every piece of evidence safe. I knew she'd try to deny everything, probably come up with some fake apology or sob story to make me feel guilty. That's what she was good at, lying, manipulating, making me doubt myself. But I wasn't going to fall for it anymore. Meanwhile, I also thought about the kids. I didn't want this to tear them apart, but I knew the truth would come out in the end. They deserved to know what kind of person their mother was, and I had to be ready to tell them when the time came. I kept a close eye on her, waiting for her next move. Every time she called or texted, I analyzed her words, trying to catch her in another lie. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not anymore. The more I watched her, the more I realized how deep her deception went. Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was actively trying to destroy what little family we had left. I felt betrayed on a level I'd never experienced before, but I also felt determined. I wasn't going to let her ruin everything without paying a price. I had to stay strong for myself and for the kids. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. This was only the beginning of what I knew would be a long, painful fight to reclaim what was left of my dignity and whatever chance I had left at moving on. The days turned into weeks, and every new revelation only solidified my resolve. I kept the evidence I had, gathered close, knowing that once I laid everything out in court, there would be no room for her to deny the truth. The more I saw her try to spin stories or manipulate the kids, the more I realized I had to be careful. I couldn't fall into her trap. She thrived on guilt, on making herself seem innocent. But I knew her game now. I'd seen her with Frank, I'd seen her lie, I'd heard her betray me right in my own house. The turning point came when I finally had enough proof to confront her publicly. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer and we went over everything: her cheating, her lies, her attempts to manipulate the kids. I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief. Anger that she'd done this to me, to our family. Relief that I finally had the ammunition I needed to end this nightmare. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not anymore. When I sat her down to talk, I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew everything was about to come crashing down. I laid out the evidence, screenshots, recordings, her late-night meetings, and told her that I was filing for full custody, that I was done playing her game. She tried to deny it again, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her face contorted with rage and frustration when she realized she was cornered. She began to scream and cry, calling me a jealous monster, saying I was ruining her life. But I didn't care. I told her I'd had enough of her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. That moment was like a switch flipping inside me. I finally saw her for who she truly was: someone selfish, heartless, and willing to destroy everything we'd built just for her own pleasure. I felt a strange sense of clarity, like I was finally waking up from a nightmare. I knew I had to take control now, for the sake of my kids and myself. I told her she needed to move out immediately, that I was done with her games. She burst into tears, but I didn't back down. I calmly explained that I would fight for custody and that I wouldn't let her manipulate the situation anymore. In the days that followed, I made arrangements for her to leave the house. It was hard, watching her pack her things and knowing she'd chosen Frank over her family. I kept my emotions in check, but inside I was seething. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious, all at once. I knew I'd need to get a lawyer to handle the divorce, but I also knew I had to be strategic. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, but I didn't want to let her ruin everything completely. I was determined to come out of this stronger, to rebuild my life from the ashes. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence: the last pieces of her lies, her manipulations, her attempts to sway the kids' opinions. I knew she'd do everything she could to turn them against me, but I also knew the truth would come out. I kept reminding myself that I deserved better, that I'd given her enough chances to come clean, but she had chosen her own selfish desires over our family. That realization was what kept me going. I was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant a long, painful legal battle. I owed it to myself, and most of all, I owed it to my children, to give them a father they could trust. That night, I sat silently in my quiet house, the weight of everything pressing down on me. It was over, or at least it was the beginning of the end. I felt a strange mix of grief and release. Losing her was painful, but staying with her would have been even worse. Now I had a plan, a path forward, and I was determined not to let her win. I realized that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that teach you the most about your own strength, and I was just starting to find mine. The court date came faster than I expected, and I remember feeling this strange calm wash over me as I sat there, watching her squirm under the weight of all the evidence I'd presented. She tried to play the victim, crying and begging, but her words sounded hollow. The judge saw right through her bullshit. The custody hearing was brutal, but I felt confident. My evidence was solid and the truth was on my side. I fought hard for full custody of the kids, knowing she'd try every trick in the book to sway their opinion, but I was prepared. I wanted my children to see that honesty, loyalty, and integrity mattered. That betrayal has consequences. In the end, I got the custody arrangement I fought for, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wanted to protect my kids from her lies and manipulations. I told her she could visit, but I made it clear the trust was broken beyond repair. She was furious, screaming and cursing, but I just sat there, exhausted but relieved. I'd finally taken control of my life again. I knew she'd be angry and probably try to make my life miserable, but I also knew I wouldn't let her. I was done being the victim of her lies. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was messy, full of legal battles and emotional upheaval, but I managed to keep my head straight. I moved out of the house, leaving behind the memories of a life I no longer recognized. I found a new place, a fresh start, where I could breathe without feeling like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. The kids and I grew closer during those tough times, more honest, more resilient. I never wanted them to think I was weak or that I'd let her. And I think that's what kept me going each day. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from all of this. Trust is fragile, betrayal cuts deep, and sometimes love isn't enough to save a relationship that's rotten underneath. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, no matter how painful, is the only way to regain your dignity. I used to believe that marriage was about loyalty and honesty, things I thought she valued. But sometimes people show you who they really are only when it's too late. So I'd tell anyone reading this to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate, move cautiously, and don't ignore the signs. Because in the end, your happiness and sanity come first. I've moved on from the anger and shock. I still carry the scars, but I also carry a sense of strength I never knew I had. I can sleep at night knowing I did everything I could to protect myself and my kids. And honestly, the betrayal taught me a harsh but valuable lesson. Sometimes the only thing you can really rely on is yourself. It hurts, but it's also freeing. I know I'll be okay. I've learned to trust myself again, and that's what matters most. Thanks for listening.